Ma'am, economy passengers board through the other lane. The sentence landed across the terminal like a slap nobody expected to hear out loud. At exactly 7:42 p.m., under the cold white lights of Gate C-18 inside Reagan National Airport, dozens of travelers turned their heads toward the woman standing silently beside the priority boarding scanner. Serena Vaughn didn't react immediately. She stood there in a black hoodie, dark jeans, and white sneakers, one hand resting on the handle of a small carry-on bag. No designer labels, no jewelry, no entourage, just calm eyes and a boarding pass still glowing green beneath the scanner light. Daniel Mercer, director of elite passenger experience for Alteris Air, stared at her with the kind of confidence that only came from years of never being questioned. Tall, polished, silver tie clipped perfectly beneath his navy suit, he stepped closer and forced a tight smile that never reached his eyes. "You're holding up priority boarding," he said louder this time. "First-class passengers only." Serena slowly lifted the boarding pass again. Seat 1A, International Executive Cabin. Fully confirmed. Daniel barely glanced at it before pressing something on the terminal screen. The scanner beeped red this time. A quiet murmur moved through the gate area. A white businessman near the boarding lane smirked under his breath, while another passenger shook her head uncomfortably. Serena remained still. Too still. Like someone who had already seen this moment before it even happened. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Serena Vaughn. Daniel crossed his arms. "There we go," he announced, turning the red error message toward nearby passengers as if displaying evidence in court. "Invalid authorization." The air around gate C-18 changed instantly. What had been the soft noise of rolling suitcases and boarding announcements suddenly felt charged. Serena tilted her head slightly. "That's interesting," she said quietly. Her voice carried no anger. That somehow made it worse. Behind the counter, Maya Brooks, a young trainee supervisor barely 6 months into the job, looked up from her monitor. Her eyes narrowed. She had seen the boarding profile earlier that afternoon. The system attached to Serena's reservation had encrypted executive markers she had never seen before. Owner-level clearance. Internal lock protection. She glanced toward Daniel, uncertain whether to speak. But Daniel had already decided what Serena was in his mind. "Ma'am," he continued, lowering his voice just enough to sound dangerous instead of loud. "People can't just walk into elite cabins because they printed fake boarding passes online." A few nearby passengers shifted awkwardly. Someone in the back quietly started recording with a phone. Serena noticed. She noticed everything. The reflections in the terminal glass. The silence spreading through the gate. The way Maya looked nervous now. The way Daniel kept talking because silence made him uncomfortable. Serena finally stepped closer to the scanner. "Run the authorization again," she said calmly. Daniel laughed once through his nose. "I already did." Then he leaned in slightly. "And trust me, people like you don't accidentally end up in seat 1A. The sentence hung in the air like smoke. Maya's stomach dropped instantly. Because the moment Daniel said it, the terminal stopped feeling like an airport. It started feeling like a courtroom. And Serena Vaughn still hadn't raised her voice once. Serena Vaughn had spent 23 years learning what silence could do to a room. Sometimes it calmed people. Sometimes it exposed them. And standing beneath the glowing departure screens at gate C-18, she could already feel the exposure beginning. Daniel Mercer straightened his suit jacket and tapped the scanner again with unnecessary force. Another red error flashed across the screen. He looked satisfied now, almost relieved, like the machine had confirmed something he already believed the second Serena walked into the terminal wearing a hoodie instead of a tailored suit. Around them, the boarding lane had slowed to a crawl. Travelers whispered behind coffee cups and rolling carry-ons while the soft voice of an airport announcement echoed overhead announcing delayed departures to Denver and San Diego. Serena glanced briefly through the tall glass windows overlooking the runway where rain streaked across the tarmac under white floodlights. Calm, controlled, unmoved. Maya Brooks could not stop staring at the screen in front of her. The passenger profile attached to Serena Vaughn's ticket did not make sense. Hidden executive routing. Priority encryption. Internal security masking usually reserved for board members and federal officials. Maya swallowed hard. Sir, she said carefully toward Daniel. Maybe we should rerun the profile through executive verification. Daniel did not even look at her. There is nothing to verify, he replied sharply. This is exactly how scams happen. People count on employees being too nervous to question them. Serena watched Maya for a moment. The young trainee looked trapped between policy and instinct. Serena recognized that look immediately. She had worn it herself once. At 24 years old, Serena had stood in another airport almost 3,000 miles away wearing a navy blazer she could barely afford after closing her first corporate consulting deal. A gate agent had pulled her aside in front of a crowded terminal and asked whether she was traveling with the family she had just walked behind. The woman had not asked because Serena looked confused. She asked because Serena was black. Serena remembered the humiliation more than the words. The way nearby passengers avoided eye contact. The way the agent smiled afterward like embarrassment was part of airport procedure. That memory never left her. Neither did the lesson. People rarely showed you who they were when things were easy. Airports did. Hotels did. Boardrooms did. Places built around status always revealed what people truly believed about who belonged near power. Daniel folded his arms tighter. I am going to need identification, he said. Serena handed him her driver's license without argument. Daniel glanced at it for less than 2 seconds before handing it back. Interesting, he muttered. You do not look like a Serena Vaughn. A few passengers nearby exchanged uncomfortable looks. Someone quietly whispered, did he really just say that? Serena slipped the license back into her pocket slowly. And what exactly is a Serena Vaughn supposed to look like? Daniel smirked faintly, but never answered. Because the truth was already sitting in the air between them. Maya looked down again at the monitor. Her pulse quickened suddenly. A hidden line of text had appeared beneath Serena's boarding profile after the second scan attempt. Executive shareholder access. Level Omega. Maya's eyes widened instantly. She looked up toward Serena again, then toward Daniel, whose confidence was growing more dangerous by the second. And somewhere behind them, another phone camera quietly started recording. The atmosphere around gate C-18 no longer felt like a boarding lane. It felt like a stage seconds before something irreversible happened. Travelers stopped pretending not to watch. Conversations faded into whispers. Even the constant rolling of suitcases across the polished airport floor seemed quieter now. Daniel Mercer sensed the attention and leaned into it instead of backing away. People like him always mistook public embarrassment for authority. He tapped his security radio clipped near his belt. I need airport response at gate C-18, he said clearly. Possible fraudulent boarding attempt involving executive cabin access. The words spread through the terminal faster than the announcement itself. A woman near the charging station looked up sharply from her laptop. A man holding a coffee muttered, seriously? Serena Vaughn did not move. She stood with one hand resting on her carry-on handle, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. The calm around her almost looked unnatural compared to the growing tension swallowing the gate. Maya Brooks felt heat rise into her face. Her eyes stayed locked on the terminal screen in front of her. Executive shareholder access. Level Omega. The warning was impossible to ignore now. Internal system restrictions prevented ordinary employees from even opening profiles marked at that level. Maya glanced toward Daniel again. He had not checked the executive clearance once. Not once. Because he had already decided Serena did not belong there before touching the keyboard. Sir, Maya said carefully, trying again, the profile is restricted. Maybe corporate should verify before security escalates this. Daniel turned toward her slowly. The disappointment in his expression felt cold enough to freeze the room. You are a trainee, he replied. This is what manipulation looks like. Learn the difference between confidence and entitlement. Serena's eyes shifted briefly toward Maya. There was no panic in them. No pleading. Just recognition. Like she understood exactly how difficult it was for someone young to speak against a system designed to punish hesitation. Another airport announcement echoed overhead while rain continued sliding down the terminal windows behind them. Flight 908 to Los Angeles, now boarding Group 1. But nobody in the priority lane moved anymore. They were all watching Serena. A white couple dressed in expensive travel coats stepped closer to the boarding entrance. The husband glanced at Serena and shook his head impatiently. Can we move this along? He asked Daniel. Some of us actually paid for first class. Daniel nodded immediately. Of course, sir. Then he looked directly at Serena. This is exactly the problem. One disruption and the entire boarding process gets delayed. Serena finally spoke again, voice low and even. Interesting choice of words. Daniel smirked faintly. What is? Serena tilted her head slightly. Calling a black woman standing quietly with a valid ticket a disruption. The silence after that sentence hit harder than shouting ever could. Maya looked down at the screen again and suddenly noticed something else. The system logs were changing in real time. Daniel had manually overridden Serena's authorization after the successful scan. He had forced the error himself. Maya's stomach dropped. Nearby, another passenger raised a phone higher to capture the scene while a young man whispered, "Yo, this is going online tonight." Daniel heard him and his jaw tightened. The control he thought he had over the gate was starting to slip around the edges. Then the distant sound of approaching airport officers echoed across the terminal floor. And for the first time since the confrontation started, several people watching looked genuinely nervous. Serena Vaughn did not. Two airport officers appeared at the far end of the terminal wearing dark blue uniforms and the tired expressions of people expecting another routine disturbance. But the moment they approached gate C-18, even they seemed to notice something unusual in the air. Nobody was yelling. Nobody was resisting. The only person fully in control of herself was the woman being accused. Serena Vaughn stood beside the boarding scanner with quiet composure while dozens of strangers watched like witnesses waiting for a verdict. Daniel Mercer immediately stepped forward before the officers could speak. "We have a passenger attempting unauthorized access to executive boarding," he announced confidently. "Possible fraud case." One of the officers, a middle-aged man named Officer Grant Ellis, glanced toward Serena. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass?" Serena handed it over calmly. Grant examined it longer than Daniel had. His eyes narrowed slightly when he saw Seat 1A. International Executive Cabin. Valid timestamp. Correct gate authorization. He looked toward Daniel. "This scans as confirmed." Daniel smiled tightly. The system flagged it after verification. Maya Brooks felt her pulse spike again. Because she knew that was not true. She had watched Daniel manually trigger the override himself. The terminal lights reflected across her monitor as she stared at the executive warning still glowing on screen. Level Omega access. Internal protection enabled. Her hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. Beside the charging station, a woman recording with her phone whispered to her friend, "Something feels really off here." Another traveler nodded. She has not even raised her voice once. The crowd was changing now. Earlier, people watched with curiosity. Now they watched with suspicion toward Daniel instead. Serena noticed it too. Power inside public spaces always shifted quietly before it shifted loudly. Officer Ellis handed the boarding pass back carefully. "Ma'am, do you have additional identification?" Serena reached into her hoodie pocket and handed over a black card holder. Inside sat a government-issued identification card and a platinum executive credential embossed with silver lettering. Officer Ellis read the name once, then again slower. His expression changed almost instantly, though he tried to hide it. Daniel noticed. "The credentials can be fake," he interrupted quickly. "These scams are becoming sophisticated." Serena looked directly at him. "You keep saying scam," she said calmly. "But you still have not explained what exactly I have done wrong." Daniel opened his mouth, then hesitated for half a second too long. The silence exposed him more than any answer could have. Maya finally stepped away from the terminal counter. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "Sir, the system did not flag her profile." Daniel's head snapped toward her. "Excuse me." Maya swallowed hard but continued. "The override came from this station manually." Several nearby passengers immediately looked toward Daniel. The energy around the gate shifted sharply again. A businessman lowered his coffee cup slowly. Someone near the window whispered, "Oh wow." Daniel laughed once, but it sounded forced now. "She does not understand the system yet," he said dismissively toward the officers. Training employees sometimes confuse authorization layers. But Maya did not sit back down this time. Fear was still visible in her face, yet something stronger had started pushing against it. "No, sir," she said carefully. "I watched the successful scan before the override." Complete silence followed. Even the airport announcements seemed distant suddenly. Serena Vaughn remained motionless, but inside the terminal the balance of power had begun moving inch by inch away from Daniel Mercer. And somewhere behind the growing crowd, another passenger quietly uploaded the video with a caption that simply read, "They picked the wrong woman tonight." The terminal had gone so quiet that the soft hum of the runway lights outside sounded louder than the crowd itself. Daniel Mercer stood frozen for one dangerous second after Maya Brooks exposed the manual override. It was not enough time for most people to notice. But Serena Vaughn noticed everything. She noticed the twitch in his jaw, the quick glance toward the officers, the way confidence drained from people the moment accountability entered the room. Officer Ellis looked toward Daniel carefully now. "Did you manually alter the authorization?" he asked. Daniel straightened immediately. "I followed protocol," he snapped. The passenger raised multiple concerns. Serena almost smiled at that. Concerns. Such a clean word for something so ugly. A nearby passenger lowered his phone slightly and muttered, "Man, she has literally done nothing." Another woman whispered, "This feels wrong." The crowd was no longer watching Serena like a suspect. They were watching Daniel like a man trying to outrun his own decisions. But instead of stepping back, Daniel doubled down. People like him often did when power started slipping away. "Ma'am," he said sharply toward Serena, "I need you to step aside while we complete a secondary review." Serena stayed exactly where she was. "You already completed the review," she replied calmly. "You just did not like the result." The words landed with surgical precision. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice enough to sound threatening without raising it publicly. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." Serena looked directly into his eyes. "No," she said softly. "I think your assumptions made it harder than it needed to be." For a brief moment, the reflection of flashing runway lights crossed the terminal windows behind her, and something about the scene suddenly pulled Serena backward through time. She was 17 again, standing in another airport almost 30 years earlier. Cheap denim jacket, worn backpack, scholarship papers folded carefully in her carry-on. She had saved for months to attend a national academic program in Boston. But before boarding, a gate attendant stopped her and accused her of being in the wrong boarding lane. "First-class students only," the woman had said while glancing at Serena's skin before her ticket. Serena remembered standing there while other students stared. Remembered missing the flight after security delays turned into humiliation. Remembered crying silently in an airport bathroom because she realized intelligence did not protect you from prejudice once people decided you did not belong near wealth. That memory hardened into ambition years later. It became fuel. It became boardrooms, acquisitions, billion-dollar negotiations. It became Serena Vaughn. Back in gate C-18, Officer Ellis shifted awkwardly. Even he looked uncomfortable now. Daniel sensed it too, and desperation started leaking through the edges of his authority. "If she refuses secondary screening," he said loudly, "we can deny boarding entirely." A sharp murmur moved through the crowd. Maya stepped forward before fear could stop her this time. "Sir, there is no basis for denial," she said. Daniel turned toward her instantly. "Enough." But Maya kept going. "Her profile is protected under executive authorization. The system literally warns employees not to interfere." Several nearby passengers reacted immediately. "Wait, executive authorization?" someone whispered. Serena watched Maya carefully. Courage always looked shaky in the beginning. That did not make it weak. Daniel's face tightened. "You are confused," he said coldly. "And after tonight, you may want to reconsider whether this company is the right fit for you." Maya's face paled slightly. The threat was subtle, public enough to sting, quiet enough to deny later. Serena finally spoke again, her voice calm enough to cut through the entire terminal. "That is the thing about systems like this," she said slowly. "The punishment always starts when someone tells the truth." And for the first time all night, Daniel Mercer had no response ready. The tension at gate C-18 had stopped feeling temporary. It settled into the terminal like weather. Travelers who had originally been rushing toward boarding now stood still beneath the glowing departure screens, phones raised quietly, eyes moving between Daniel Mercer and the woman he could no longer control. Serena Vaughn checked the silver watch beneath her hoodie sleeve once. 8 minutes. That was how long this entire situation had lasted. 8 minutes for assumptions to become humiliation. 8 minutes for a crowded airport gate to expose exactly how power behaved when it believed nobody important was watching. Daniel folded his arms tighter as though posture alone could restore authority slipping through his hands. "This boarding process is over," he announced toward the officers. "She will not be entering that aircraft tonight." Officer Ellis hesitated. The hesitation alone told Serena everything she needed to know. The room had already changed sides emotionally. People simply had not admitted it aloud yet. Serena slowly reached into her pocket and removed her phone. No dramatic movements. No anger. Just precision. The same calm precision that had built billion-dollar negotiations across 3 continents. Daniel noticed immediately. "Who are you calling?" he demanded. Serena unlocked the screen and typed a single message before raising the phone to her ear. "Activate the audit release," she said calmly the second the line connected. A woman's voice answered instantly. Crisp. Professional. "Understood, Ms. Vaughn." Full protocol. Serena looked directly at Daniel while nearby passengers strained to listen. "Full protocol," she replied, "including executive behavior logs." The call ended. No explanation. No theatrics. Yet something about the exchange tightened the air around the gate instantly. Maya Brooks watched Serena carefully now. The calm no longer looked mysterious. It looked intentional, like someone waiting for a clock to strike the exact second they already predicted hours earlier. Daniel scoffed loudly to cover the uncertainty building in his face. "You think a phone call changes policy?" Serena slid the phone back into her pocket slowly. "No," she said. "Truth changes policy. Phone calls just speed it up." A few passengers exchanged looks after hearing that. The woman live streaming near the charging station whispered into her camera, "This lady is ice cold." Another traveler nodded quietly. "She talks like she owns the airport." Across the terminal, several employee tablets suddenly buzzed simultaneously. Then another. Then another. Flight attendants standing near the jet bridge glanced down at their screens with confused expressions. A supervisor farther down the concourse stopped walking completely. After checking his device, Maya's monitor flickered once before a red internal banner appeared across the top of the system interface. Executive review initiated. Corporate oversight active. Daniel saw it too. His expression tightened instantly. "What is that?" he muttered under his breath. Maya stared at the warning message. Her pulse accelerated. More internal alerts followed beneath it. Legal review. Customer discrimination escalation. Immediate preservation of employee communication records. The system was locking itself down in real time. Daniel grabbed the edge of the counter. "Who are you?" he asked finally. Not arrogant this time. Nervous. Serena looked at him for a long second before answering. "Someone who gave this company every chance to become better before tonight." The sentence hit the crowd like a shockwave. Even Officer Ellis stepped back slightly now. Around them, the terminal no longer sounded normal. The constant airport noise had faded beneath the weight of uncertainty spreading through the gate. Employees whispered. Supervisors checked devices repeatedly. Somewhere farther down the concourse, another executive started walking quickly toward gate C-18 after receiving the emergency alerts. Serena noticed all of it without moving an inch. Daniel Mercer still thought he was managing a passenger problem. He did not realize he was standing in the middle of a corporate collapse already beginning around him. The first executive arrived at gate C-18 almost out of breath. Dark suit. Airport credentials swinging against his chest. Eyes locked on the flashing alerts covering employee screens throughout the terminal. He pushed through the growing crowd of passengers recording on their phones and stopped the second he saw Serena Vaughn standing beside the boarding scanner. The color drained from his face instantly. Daniel Mercer turned toward him with visible relief. "Thank God," he said quickly. This woman manipulated the executive system and triggered some kind of internal escalation. The executive did not answer him. He kept staring at Serena instead, like a man realizing he had walked into the wrong side of a disaster. Around them, employee tablets continued buzzing with emergency notifications while more supervisors appeared farther down the concourse, whispering urgently into radios. Maya Brooks stepped backward from the counter slowly as the reality of the situation started becoming impossible to ignore. Serena remained perfectly still beneath the white terminal lights, one hand resting lightly on her carry-on handle while rain streaked across the windows behind her like silver lines across glass. Calm. Untouched. Dangerous in the quietest possible way. The executive finally spoke, but not to Daniel. "Ms. Vaughn," he said carefully, almost breathless, "we were not informed you were personally conducting the audit tonight." Every sound around gate C18 seemed to disappear at once. Phones lowered slightly. Several passengers blinked in confusion. Daniel stared at the man beside him. "What did you just say?" Serena looked toward the executive calmly. "That was intentional." Daniel laughed once in disbelief. "Audit." The executive swallowed hard. "Sir, this is Serena Vaughn." Silence. Complete silence. Even the rolling departure announcements overhead felt distant now. Daniel looked at Serena again, but this time the confidence was gone. He searched her face like he might somehow undo the last 10 minutes if he looked hard enough. Serena met his stare without emotion. The executive continued carefully, aware that half the terminal was now listening. Ms. Vaughn chairs the majority acquisition group that stabilized Air during the recession. A passenger near the charging station whispered, "Wait. What?" Another person lowered their phone slowly. "No way." Maya's eyes widened as realization crashed fully into place. Serena Vaughn was not just important. She was the reason the airline still existed. Daniel took a slow step backward. "No," he muttered. "No, there has to be some mistake." Serena finally stepped closer to him. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just enough for the truth to land where everyone could hear it clearly. "You tried to remove me from a company my investments kept alive," she said softly. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The sentence cut through the terminal with the weight of a verdict. Daniel's face lost what little color remained. He glanced around the gate area and saw something even worse than anger staring back at him. Witnesses, travelers, employees, officers, cameras, an entire terminal full of people who had watched exactly how he treated someone he believed had no power. Maya looked down at her monitor again as new alerts flooded the system. Executive conduct review active. Legal hold initiated. Employee access under investigation. Nearby, another supervisor checked his tablet and whispered, "Oh my God." Serena's phone vibrated once. She glanced down briefly before slipping it back into her pocket. "The board has already reviewed the footage," she said calmly. Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because suddenly every sentence he used earlier sounded different now. "People like you. Disruption. Fake credentials. Wrong boarding lane." The terminal remembered all of it. Serena looked around the silent crowd one last time before speaking again. "The problem was never that you did not know who I was," she said evenly. "The problem is how comfortable you became disrespecting someone you thought did not matter." Daniel Mercer looked like a man watching the floor disappear beneath him inch by inch. The confidence that had filled his voice earlier was gone now, replaced by something far more fragile. Panic. Around gate C18, employee tablets continued lighting up with urgent alerts while supervisors whispered into radios that suddenly sounded much less controlled than before. One by one, more executives arrived near the boarding lane, their expressions tightening the moment they recognized Serena Vaughn standing calmly beside the scanner. Nobody ignored her now. Nobody questioned her boarding pass now. The terminal had transformed completely in less than 15 minutes. Earlier, Serena stood alone beneath suspicious eyes. Now the entire gate area seemed to orbit around her silence. Maya Brooks watched Daniel carefully. He kept trying to recover authority through posture, but fear had already reached his eyes. The people recording on their phones noticed it too. "This is insane," someone whispered near the terminal windows. "He really tried to throw out the woman who basically owns the airline." Officer Ellis stepped backward from the counter slowly, suddenly looking very aware that his presence was now attached to a corporate investigation unfolding live in front of hundreds of witnesses. Serena's phone buzzed again. She glanced down briefly before looking toward the senior executive who had arrived moments earlier. "Have the board members reviewed the gate footage?" she asked calmly. "Yes, ma'am," he answered immediately, "including the audio." Daniel shut his eyes for 1 second too long. Audio. That meant every sentence, every assumption, every careless word spoken beneath the bright airport lights was now permanent. Serena nodded once. "Good." Another alert sounded across the terminal. Then another. Daniel instinctively grabbed for the tablet attached to the boarding station, but the screen flashed red the second he touched it. Access restricted. Internal review active. His jaw tightened immediately. "What is this?" he demanded. A nearby systems manager checked his own device before answering carefully. "Your administrative credentials have been temporarily suspended pending executive review." A low murmur rolled through the crowd. Someone quietly whispered, "Oh, he is done." Daniel looked toward Serena again, desperate now. You cannot seriously be destroying careers over a misunderstanding. Serena's expression never changed. A misunderstanding happens once, she replied softly. Bias becomes a pattern. The sentence hit harder than anger could have. Maya lowered her eyes briefly, because she knew Serena was right. Every employee in that terminal knew it. The problem was never one boarding pass. It was the ease with which people decided who deserved humiliation. The second appearance did not match status. Across social media, videos from Gate C18 were already exploding online. Passengers refreshed their screens and watched view counts climb by the second. One livestream title simply read, "Airline executive exposed after profiling black woman at gate." Another showed Serena standing motionless, while Daniel argued in the background beneath the caption. She stayed calm while they destroyed themselves. The senior executive beside Serena suddenly received another notification and his face tightened further. "Ms. Vaughn," he said quietly. The acquisition board voted unanimously. Daniel stared at him. What acquisition? Serena finally turned fully toward him. The expansion project your department was preparing for tomorrow, she answered. The $8.4 billion partnership. Daniel's face drained completely. Serena continued calmly. It no longer exists. The silence afterward felt enormous. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faintly beyond the runway glass, while rain hammered softly against the terminal windows. Serena picked up her carry-on bag with slow, effortless composure. No rage. No celebration. Somehow that made everything worse for Daniel Mercer. Because the woman he tried to remove from first class had not screamed, threatened, or begged once. She simply stood still long enough for the system to reveal itself in front of the entire world. Rain continued sliding down the massive terminal windows as if the night itself was trying to wash something away from Gate C18. The crowd had not moved. Travelers still stood beneath the departure screens with phones raised, watching the final moments of a power structure collapse in real time. Daniel Mercer remained frozen beside the boarding counter while restricted access warnings flashed red across every screen he touched. The authority he wore so comfortably earlier had disappeared completely now. All that remained was exposure. Serena Vaughn adjusted the sleeve of her black hoodie calmly and lifted her carry-on bag from the polished floor. Around her, executives whispered urgently into phones while legal notifications continued flooding internal systems across the airline. Maya Brooks stood near the terminal monitor, trying to process how quickly everything had changed. Less than 20 minutes earlier, Serena had been treated like a trespasser. Now entire departments were entering emergency review because one woman stayed calm long enough for the truth to reveal itself publicly. A nearby passenger refreshed his live stream and stared at the screen. 2.3 million views already, he whispered in disbelief. Another woman shook her head slowly. This is going to be everywhere by morning. Serena glanced briefly toward Maya before speaking. You did the difficult thing tonight, she said softly. Maya looked stunned. I almost stayed quiet. Serena nodded once. Most people do. The words settled heavily between them, because everyone standing there understood the deeper truth underneath what happened at Gate C18. Systems rarely collapse because of one openly hateful person. They survive because too many decent people convince themselves silence is safer. Daniel finally stepped forward again, but the arrogance was gone from his posture now. Ms. Vaughn, he said quietly, struggling to steady his voice. I would like the opportunity to explain. Serena looked at him carefully for a long moment. The terminal lights reflected softly against the glass behind her, while distant thunder rolled somewhere beyond the runway. You already explained yourself, she replied calmly. Every sentence tonight explained exactly what kind of culture this airline allowed to grow. Daniel lowered his eyes. There was nothing left to argue with because the evidence was no longer hidden in reports or complaints buried inside company emails. Hundreds of witnesses had seen it live. Millions more were now watching online. Officer Ellis removed his cap slowly, visibly uncomfortable. Ma'am, he said toward Serena, for what it is worth. I am sorry. Serena gave a small nod. Make sure the next woman does not need an audience before someone listens. The officer looked away immediately after that. The senior executive standing nearby received one final message on his tablet and inhaled sharply. Corporate has finalized the decision, he announced carefully. Daniel Mercer is terminated effective immediately. Additional investigations are pending. Nobody reacted with surprise anymore. The crowd had already reached that conclusion long before the official words arrived. Serena turned toward the jet bridge in trance as employees stepped aside instinctively to clear a path for her. No one questioned her boarding pass now. No one doubted where she belonged now. Yet Serena paused once before walking forward completely. She looked back at the silent terminal one final time. At the passengers. At Maya. At the employees suddenly forced to confront themselves beneath harsh airport lighting and phone cameras they could no longer ignore. Then Serena Vaughn delivered the sentence people would replay online for weeks afterward. "I did not raise my voice tonight," she said evenly. "I raised the standard." Complete silence followed her words. The kind of silence that only arrives after truth finally says something nobody can pretend not to hear. Then Serena turned, stepped onto the jet bridge, and disappeared toward the aircraft while the storm outside kept moving across the runway like the world itself was changing with her.